My name is Joe Bellata with Lenovo, SAP Solutions Architect, and today I'm here to talk to you about scaling your SAP HANA systems. We have a small crowd, so we'll keep it interactive. If you have any questions, just throw up your hand and we'll address them as we go through this. So what we'll talk about, I'll show the hardware stack that we use, hardware and software stack, the high availability options, our TDI storage and other solutions from Lenovo that are available in the SAP HANA space, and then we'll summarize. So let's take a look at the hardware and software stack. So at the bottom, we have the 38 and 3950 chassis. It's from Lenovo. That's the platform we've chosen to certify with. It's a very flexible architecture. It's our X6 architecture. Currently running Broadwell processors. Above that, you have VMware as an option. Then your SUSE for SAP applications would sit on top of that. Then the IBM General, this says GPFS, they now call it Spectrum Scale. It's their general parallel file system. That is required for scale-out models. It's optional for single nodes at SPS 11 and above. And then HANA would sit on top of that. So if you're virtualized, you have your virtual machine sitting on top of the hardware, and that's what the stack looks like. This is the architecture. Extremely flexible, completely modular. So this is a processor book. This is a 4U chassis. It's also available in an 8U chassis. We can plug in processor books. We can start as small as 2 socket or two CPUs with 128 gig and scale that all the way up to 8 sockets at 12 terabytes. So you don't have to repurpose any of your hardware. There's no forklift upgrades with other vendors that you would see. It's all completely modular and highly scalable. This here is a I/O book that would sit in the front. All your drives would go in there. Your DIMMs sit on top of your processors. So if you needed to add capacity, say you started out in this model here, 2 sockets, 128, you wanted to take it up to, say, 4 sockets at 256 or 512, you would just pop in another 2 processor books with the DIMMs, and your capacity's there and ready for it. Nope, it's the drive slots are on the far left here. The processor slots run across the front. So there's 4 here. In an 8U system, it would look exactly the same. It's a double high chassis. There's a mid plane in the center that kind of interconnects everything. In the back, you have your I/O books. Sorry, these here are drive books in the front. In the back are your I/O books for your Ethernet cards, your other interfaces that you would have, and they all plug in front and back. So this is basically lidless service. Once this goes into your rack, it never has to come out again. So if they have to service anything, a DIMM failure, whatever, they just pull the processor book out the front, flip the lid off, replace the DIMM, slide it back in. Question? I'll show you that. I have charts on that. So you may have to, we have to populate the memory channels evenly for optimal performance. So if you start real small, you might be using 8 or 16 gig DIMMs, and then as you get into larger memory configurations, you may have to go up to 32 or 64 gig DIMMs. So there would be a DIMM replacement possibly at some point in the migration. But that's the only thing. I mean, and even if you start off with the 4U chassis and you decide you want to grow to an 8U chassis, we have an RPQ that is basically just the metal box. So you can buy the 8U high chassis with the mid plane, and the only thing that's left behind is that shell. All the processor books would just repurpose into the new chassis. So.
Is there a 3.5 storage book, or is it?
That's 2.5 for storage. SSDs, spinning disk, all fit in that format. All right. Configurations. This is what we started talking about. So if you look Let's see, what line is it? It'll show you. So for like 128 gig, I can't walk over there to see this, but it'll show you the DIMM slots that we'd use. Yep, 16 by 8. And then as you get into the higher memory DIMMs, or the higher memory configurations, you would jump up to 32 by 64 in a 4-socket. But if some of our customers, as we look at their HANA requirements, if they have a pretty substantial growth path, we could position them in an 8U chassis with 4 processor books, or even 2 processor books, depending on what they wanted to do. And then they'd have that growth space there. You don't have to worry about allocating additional rack space. It's all built in there. Just plug in processor books. And this talks about, so we talked about the 2-socket, here's the 4-socket certified configurations and their migration paths. This gray area here talks about, or that indicates your relaxed configuration. So SAP allows for non-production with double the memory to core ratio. So that's available all the way up to 12 terabytes. So this is the 4-processor example I told you about in an 8U chassis, and then the 8-processor up to 12 terabytes in a relaxed configuration. We're certified to 8 terabytes for SPS 12, so the more that SAP HANA advances, the better the performance. SAP relaxes the memory to core ratios to some degree. So we can go up to 8 sockets, 8 terabytes for Suite on HANA type implementation. We good? Any questions? You look like you're thinking hard. No? Okay. Scale out configuration. So they were all standalones I was showing you about there. Scale out, same type of thing. We have up to 2 terabytes for SPS 11 or better. And up in an 8-socket, we go up to 4 terabytes. Again, for SPS 11 or later. Okay, so high availability configurations. So in a single node environment, SAP HANA database replication, you go from one node to the other node, replicating your production data. So here's your prod system. This here would be your backup system or high availability node, and you're replicating memory to memory straight across using database replication. We also have options for customers that want to use this hardware for their non-production landscape. We put additional RAID attached storage enclosure on the chassis, so they can replicate their production data to the drives inside the chassis while they're running their non-production landscape off of the additional enclosure. So your hardware is just not sitting there. So it's about investment protection and utilizing the investment that you make in the HANA software or in your hardware infrastructure. Any questions? Good? Okay. Scale out. So this is an example of a scale out cluster. And again, using IBM Spectrum Scale, it's a true parallel file system. It stripes the data across the various nodes. So you can see node A has its data striped across, not only on node A itself, but also striped across the other nodes in the solution. So node B has its data on its node and then stripes it across the other nodes in the cluster. Same with C. So if any failing node, then here would be your standby node or your high availability node in the cluster. This is all interconnected with low latency 10 gig switches. There's 2 VLANs, one for HANA communications and one for node to node communications. What this does is if node C fails, there's enough data on the drive striped across the cluster to allow any node in the cluster to recover. So then The standby node assumes the role for node C, the failing node, and then loads its data into memory. Your users never get disconnected. This all happens transparently within the cluster. And this is a combination of, the SLES for SAP applications and SAP HANA handshaking to allow this all to happen within the cluster along with GPFS. And then once the node, your failing node is repaired, it then becomes your standby node. So then node C, repaired node C would then be your standby node, your active standby. So there's virtually no downtime in your cluster in a high availability configuration. 10 gig interface cards, redundant. We were using the 40 gig. There's a 40 gig interconnect between the two switches. We were using the 40 gig at one point, the InfiniBand, positioning us for future. You'll probably see those speeds with the next iteration of the Intel refresh. So it's 10 gig now that's certified, node to node. We don't have any constraint on the bandwidth. So there's really no reason to go. The 40 gig cards were expensive, so we dropped it back to 10 gig because that was more of a positioning statement. And then some of the things that happen with the technology, it's going to be with the next generation Intel. You're going to see the 40 gig speeds. Any questions? Okay. So for disaster recovery environments, so that was a high availability node, typically on the same premise. Disaster recovery is at your DR site, so you'd have your primary location in one area, your DR site in another state, cross-country, wherever. We would basically determine, what your service level agreements are within your data center, geographic possibilities, whether we're doing synchronous or asynchronous replication. Define that solution, and then use either storage replication or SAP's HANA database replication. And here's an example with the storage replication. So we have two sites, Site A, Site B. Same type of scenario, we're replicating all the production data to Site B. Same as before, your Site A goes down for whatever reason, and Site B then assumes the role of Site A, and that is now your active HANA solution. Again, with this here, you see this QAS external disk. We can do the same thing at your DR site. You can utilize that DR cluster, that DR site, as non-production hardware by running that non-production landscape off of additional RAID-attached storage.
How far can the sites be? How far away?
Asynchronous or synchronous replication restricts that to about 40 miles. And asynchronous, you can do, cross-country wherever. So there's no real limitations there. Any questions? Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about TDI storage. So in SAP lingo, TDI is tailored data center integration. So SAP allows customers to utilize their existing storage and/or network hardware for their HANA models. It's a little bit different. It isn't supported the same as the appliance model. So SAP, we have the certified appliances that were up there earlier that we certified with SAP, guaranteed performance. Numbers on that it will perform per SAP specifications. SAP holds us to specific memory to core ratios, disk access, and so forth. That is supported as an appliance. So you have a problem with it, you pick up the phone, you call SAP, and they will take it through their entire process, resolve the issue. With the TDI model, if you're using your own storage, I have some customers that use EMC storage. They have SRDF synchronizing their primary and backup site. They don't want their HANA system operating outside of that storage replication, so they opt for maybe a TDI type of implementation. In that case, if you have a problem, you call SAP, they determine it's with your storage, they will direct you then to your storage vendor to resolve it. They don't take it end to end. So that's the difference between the TDI and the certified appliances. But what we've done is with SUSE's Ceph storage, software-defined storage, we utilize our X650 M5 systems, and they become our storage controllers, and it's basically back-end storage, whatever you want to use. We have Lenovo storage, IBM storage, anything you want to put behind there, highly scalable, and performs very well in the SAP HANA environment. Any questions? This is an example of some of the offerings that we have currently. So, yes. I'm sorry? File systems, we can use, if you want GPFS, we can use XFS. It's just, GPFS is typically required for our, I don't know why this is doing this. Mm-hmm. You can, yep. Yeah, I mean, it's a TDI model. I actually, it's a different, I have a customer that has very stringent boot times. So they have like a 17 node cluster. We're looking at doing a refresh, so we're consolidating their cluster, and we're looking at using all SSD storage in a scale out type of a configuration. Again, TDI, and what the SSD storage does for us is it allows us, and we haven't fully tested this yet, but the low latency of the SSD drives will allow us to utilize or have a HANA system that can be used by the users within roughly 15 to 20 minutes of the boot. Once everything comes up, the long pole in the tent is, of course, the memory validation piece, but once the row store is loaded, with spinning disk, as the column store loads, the system is kind of bogged down for users, but with the SSD drives and the low latency of those drives, the user shouldn't see any real degradation, so they can use that HANA system right after that row store is loaded. It would be ready to use. And as the column store loads from the SSD drives, the performance should be at a point where, it's a usable system. So they said, every time they have a problem, SAP gives them a patch and says reboot your system, and it can take a while to do that. It's not something that they want to do in the middle of the week. Mm-hmm. Right. Sorry? Right, it's XFS. All right. Some additional things we're working on. This is a all scale out. We validated this solution with SAP. So this is an all SSD solution with SanDisk. So instead of having spinning media, typically what we'll do in standard solution is we'll use a combination of SSD drives for caching transactions or writes to disk, along with spinning drives. So we'll put, in an example here, you can put 12 SAS drives, 1.2 terabyte SAS drives, and we'll put 2 or 4 400 gig SSD drives for that caching to persistent store. With the SSDs, especially in the higher memory configurations, so the more memory we have, the more persistent store you need. So if the persistent store outgrows what's available, the slots available inside the chassis, we'll throw a RAID card in and direct attach or RAID attach additional storage. So you can put another 24 drives 1.2 terabyte drives in that enclosure. And then with the SSD model, we don't need that enclosure. You have an 8U footprint at 6 or 8 terabytes. So we've validated this with SAP. Understand that our team in Germany is currently working on a scale-out version of this, but that hasn't been validated to date. Well, I'm a little bit ahead of the game with this customer I'm working with here in the States. We've partnered up with a storage vendor, and we're in the process of going through the proof of technology on that solution. Here's a partnership we have with Samsung on the 128 gig DIMMs. And this thing keeps jumping ahead on me. So I can come out of presentation mode. It's not going to help it anyway. Let's see. I should use my laptop. There we go. 128 gig DIMM. This is probably going to be available. We ran this with SAP banking application and got tremendous performance out of it. We're probably not going to see this DIMM available though until the next churn of the Intel architecture. We tested it on a Haswell system, and it performed real well. But working with SAP, it looks like they want to wait for Skylake before we implement this DIMM. But this will allow you to take an 8-socket system up to 24 terabytes. So it's as the technology moves forward, the RAM increases, and SAP is shrinking the footprint requirements of HANA with the S4 product. So as they build more functionality into that, and the memory sizes increase, and the technology comes together, it gives you much more flexibility in that in the configurations. Let's see if I can flip this back. Whoa, that was not good. Okay. And then to summarize, partnering with SUSE. SUSE is the premier operating system for HANA. It's been there since day one with SAP. They do all their development on SUSE. With Lenovo, we're an industry leader with over 50% market share in the HANA space with our, X6 architecture. We have broad SAP offerings, flexible, scale up, scale out, offering the HANA space, more systems certified than any other vendor. With the SUSE OS for SAP applications, offer the high availability and disaster recovery solutions required in a HANA environment. You combine that with SUSE as an industry leader in the OX, a full-featured operating system with the failover capabilities. The open storage product in Ceph allows us to do much more with higher storage levels and larger systems. So it all comes down to great partners offering great solutions within the HANA space. Is anybody in here currently running or looking at implementing HANA? I actually had 2 customers, one yesterday in my BWA session. Had a current BWA system. They were looking to move to, the next step. They weren't quite ready to get off of BWA yet, but now they understand they need to migrate at some point because HANA or SAP is sunsetting BWA, the Business Warehouse Accelerator product, by 2020. So the migration path would be to HANA, and we are currently certifying BWA appliances on HANA certified platforms. So if you needed to upgrade your BWA today, you put it on the HANA certified platform and ease the migration into HANA. And I just got an email from a customer today looking to do that very thing. So there's a lot of opportunity out there in the SAP HANA space. There's other sessions going on here around, moving applications, your current Linux applications onto a HANA platform. Everything's running out of memory super fast. You have access to real-time data with the HANA product.
So you're putting with the increasingly larger amounts and you're looking at putting more SAP applications inside.
You can. I mean, SAP does keep us to a, restricted to a memory to core ratio. So for the analytics of the BW system, you have a lower memory to core ratio. So you have to, you can only use so much memory depending on the available cores within your system. With Broadwell, we can go up to 24 cores with the 8890 V4 processor. So we can put up to 8 terabytes for a Suite on HANA application, but only 4 terabytes for a BW application. So although the system's capable, we can go all the way up to 12 terabytes within the chassis with the 64 gig DIMMs, but that's only for a relaxed configuration in a business suite type of use case. Yep. Any other questions? Yes. It's the boot time's a lot faster. You have a smaller footprint, so you have, you can get more systems in a rack because you don't need the additional persistent store. We're the only vendor that doesn't use back-end SAN solutions. Other vendors have controllers and SANs and stuff. We have everything concise and into a rack. In fact, I'm working with SAP right now on a ITOA offering. So their IT optimization analytics offering, they have to kind of monitor your entire IT infrastructure, predictive analysis type things. I mean, we can do that in a small self-contained 2-socket, 128 gig, and then scale it up as you need it. So it's, there are benefits there. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right, I think I have, right, so that's me. So we have everything documented. If this is my contact information, if you need any additional info, you want a card, come up and see me. Shoot me an email. I'd be happy to send you the documentation or any links to our solutions. All right, with that, if there's no more questions, I appreciate your attendance, and thank you for coming.